Welcome back to another episode of the Brett Snodgrass podcast. I'm really excited that you guys are all listening and joining us here. This is the podcast where we talk about success, significance, and freedom. And I have a guest on today's show named Josh Howard. And welcome to the show, Josh. How you doing, man?
Yeah, doing great, Brett. Thanks for having me, bud.
Yeah, no problem. Josh, you know, one of the first people that I wanted to have on this particular podcast was you. Um, we haven't known each other that long, but when I think about someone who is literally living a life of significance, I would definitely have your name on that list. I'm going to kind of just tell my audience a little bit about who you are, and then I want you to kind of share your story about the life that you're living. Number one, guys, I'm with Josh Howard, and Josh is a missionary, actually lives in India since 2008. He also travels to many other places, but he teaches people about discipleship making, and he helps plant churches. He met a lovely girl from India named
Very lovely.
She's listening to this, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
Named Lashi. And they fell in love. They got married. They have 3 children now, Josiah, Jeremiah, and Zara. And he's really just living for the last 12 years this life as a missionary. And really, it's really intriguing because how I met Josh was he actually called me to get some advice on entrepreneurship. And he started a real estate business in Indianapolis, Indiana, which we've purchased a few of your homes, which has been really cool, Josh.
Quite a few. You guys have been awesome.
and
Yeah.
And that's just a bare surface of your story, man. So I don't want to like steal all of your thunder. And Josh, his investment group is called Ignite Investment Group. And I can let you share just a little bit about your ministry out in India. But welcome to the show, Josh. It is such a pleasure. And this show, again, we're going to dig in to the heart. But I want you to kind of share your story with the audience and take yourself back to, I'm assuming, college, right? You were in
Yeah.
college in America. And then for
Yeah.
some reason, you decided to give up the American dream, right? The big cookie cutter house with the picket fence and the dog and the kids. You decided to give all that up and move to India. So kind of start there, man, and share your story with us.
Yeah, man. Well, first of all, Brett, thanks for having me on here, bro. It's really an honor, and I just, man, I love your heart, love what you're doing, and trying to really put significance first, which is huge, bro. So thank you for, being such an awesome voice to the world about what's truly important in life. And it's just a cool thing, man. So yeah, man, I'll take even back a little bit further than college. So I grew up in a pretty broken home. My parents got divorced when I was about 4 years old. And I lived with my mother and her parents. And so it was kind of this joint family where my grandparents helped raise me as well. And just a really, really great upbringing in that environment, but still broken because of my family split and all that type of stuff, right? And so every week, though, my grandparents took us to church. And so I grew up in an environment that Jesus was really important. It was never like shoved down our throat, though. It was never something, honestly, super seriously taken. It probably should have been taken a little more seriously, honestly. But they were just a great family, man, and very loving and gracious. Anyway, so growing up in that environment, going to church every week, at a young age, at about 13, I knew that I wanted to do ministry the rest of my life. Like there was just this call upon my heart that I knew that there's nothing else I wanted to do in my life. So I gave my first sermon when I was 13 years old at a Sunday night church service. It was like the worst sermon you could ever imagine, bro. It was horrible.
Okay? What was it about? What was it about?
It was about temptation, and I had a fake rat on a stick and a big rat trap. I'm not kidding, bro. And about how, Satan will tempt you with the cheese, and then, you'll nibble a little bit, and then he gets you, and anyway,
That's good, man.
Yeah,
For
okay.
for
Well,
a
thank you.
13-year-old, that's really good. I don't know if they had YouTube back then, but if they did, I would have loved to video that and check it out.
Well, thank you. Thank you. They did not, but it could have gone viral for the worst sermon ever preached, something like that. So I was supposed to preach for like 20, 30 minutes, and I got done in like 5 minutes, and I had nothing else to say. But when I sat down that night, man, I knew there's nothing else I wanted to do for the rest of my life. Like there was just this overwhelming sense of God's call. And so if from 13 onwards, if you would ask me what I wanted to do, it was always preach. There was nothing else like I wanted to do. So junior high and high school, that's all I thought about was going to Bible college and becoming a pastor. Now, honestly, I just kind of assumed that'd be the normal path. Like I would go to Bible college, I'd get a church, maybe a big church. That's every young pastor's dream, right? To get maybe a big church in America and have a lot of people and all that type of stuff. But then as I got to college, like you said, that's when God really began to lift my eyes off of America and onto the nations. And so I still remember, man, I was sitting in a large conference. There were thousands of people there, and a guy gave a sermon. I don't even remember the guy's name, man. I don't even remember what he preached, but he quoted another guy. Isn't that funny how God works? Like, I don't even, like, this preacher's quoting another preacher, okay? And that's what struck me. And so the guy said, if you have but one light to burn, would you rather not burn it in a land full of darkness rather than one glowing with light?
Mm.
And they gave an altar call that night for people that wanted to devote the rest of their lives to go overseas, to go to an unreached place and take the gospel there. And I practically ran forward that night, man. I knew that was the next step in my journey with Jesus. And so I was like 21, I think. 21, 22. I think I was 22. And so after that, man, I was ready to give it all, bro. I was ready to go to I didn't care if it was Haiti. I didn't care if it was China. I didn't care if it was India, wherever it was. I was ready to go, man. And so I went back to my hotel that night. It was a Courtyard Marriott in Indianapolis, okay? Downtown Indy. So you probably know where that's at.
I do.
So I'm out in the courtyard praying to God, and I'm like, okay, God, I've given everything. I'm ready to go. There must have been some pride in my heart or something because all I heard that night, okay, and I heard God's voice very clearly. It wasn't an audible voice, so don't worry about me. I wasn't hearing voices. But in my heart, man, as I was on my knees that night praying, all I heard God say to me, which this will probably surprise you, was, Josh, I don't need you. I don't need you. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't need me? Like, I just gave up everything. Like, I'm ready to go anywhere you call me to go. I'll live in the, in a village in the middle of Africa. I'll live, in an underground church in China. I don't care. Like, I'm ready to do it. And he's like, Josh, I don't need you. And then he followed it up with this, man. And this phrase changed my life, man. Okay. He said, Josh, I don't need you, but I need you to know that I want you. And there's a difference.
Yeah.
I want you. I want to use you. I want to use you for big things, but don't you start thinking that I need you. I'm God and I'll do whatever I want. I can raise up 50,000 other Josh Howards. Like, I don't need you, but I want you. And if you and I are going to start this journey together, then you need to know that I want you, I've chosen you, but I don't need you. And so don't ever think you're needed by me, but you're wanted by me. And it was at that point on my knees in that courtyard in Indianapolis that I said, okay, God, I don't care if I'm in Haiti for 50 years or quick tripping for 5 minutes. I just want to be used by you. I just want to be in the palm of your hand and to be used by you in any place in the world, not for my glory, not for my kingdom, but for yours. And so you just take my life, take this little life and use it however you want. And so that's what started this journey overseas. Believe it or not, man, the next day is when I met the director of Good News Productions, which is a Christian audio production company. that told me about an internship to go overseas to 8 different countries and to take photos for them. And so literally 12 hours after I was on my knees in that courtyard, I met the guy that sent me overseas on my first trip to India, where I met my wife and came to the place that I live right now. So literally 12 hours after that decision, God started that journey, and it was a pivotal moment in my life that set me on this new trajectory. It was crazy.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. God is so good, man. I'm just getting kind of chills from just hearing your story. There's nothing like just having that intimacy with our Lord, and just to be so connected to hear him and guiding you. Most people are not that intimate, and so that's just an amazing, and I've been at that place before, and that's awesome, man. And so basically you did this internship, right? You went over to do these other countries, and then you were drawn. So take us back in. You went to India
Yeah.
for a while. What were you doing there? Taking pictures. Then is that when you met your wife, Lashi? What happened?
Yeah. So we went to, I traveled to many different countries. I went to Singapore, Thailand, Myanmar, Kenya, Mexico, Ukraine, the Philippines. I don't know if I mentioned the Philippines, Thailand. Anyway, like 8 or 9 different countries. And India was one of those. And so the whole time, the reason why I took that internship was I knew God was calling me to the nations. I just didn't know where. And so I just kind of wanted to test the waters and see what God would do. So the whole trip, I was praying, God, if one of these places are where you want me, just show me, open the door and show me where you want me. And so when I got to India, it was unlike, there was just a burden on my heart for this country, unlike any other place that I had been. And so I even called my mom the night I got to India. And I said, Mom, I think this is the place. I think this is the place that God's calling me to be. And so about 2 weeks after that, I was in India for a while. That's when I came to Demo, which is where I live right now. And I was taking photos. So I was doing photojournalism for them. Photography was just a hobby of mine that I was trying to use for the kingdom and test the waters overseas to see where God might lead me to go. And so on a Sunday morning, I went to a church here locally. The guy taking me around didn't speak English very well. And so he took me to the church, sat me down next to the most beautiful girl I'd ever seen in my life. No joke. And he said, she's going to try to translate what's going on in the service for you. And so that's when I met my wife, and we began to talk and get to know each other. And I mean, obviously I didn't know it at the time, but yeah, we got married like 8 months later. So wow. we knew
you don't mess around, man.
Pretty quickly. No, not at all,
when
bro. When you know, man.
Josh, when you want something, you just go after it. 12 hours, you go to the altar call. 12 hours later, you're doing as a missionary. Then 8 months, you're married, and you go after your
pretty
goals,
much,
man.
Yeah. You got to get it, man. You got to get it.
That's right.
I had so many Indian guys say when I met Lashi, Josh, time changes the mind. You need to get it now, man. You got to go after it. And so anyway, went after it hard, man. And
that's funny.
So
I know when
I'm definitely lucky.
I met my wife, and I tried to ask her dad if we could get married 6 months after we had met, and he made me wait until 9 months. So anyways, I would have been right there with him.
About the same story. Yeah, about the same story.
That's awesome, man. So that's now
yep.
You and Lashi, you got married. You have 3 children now, and you've been living in India since 2008. So, you've been 12, 13 years now. And
yeah.
So I want to kind of just dive in what you're doing. So it's not new anymore. I mean, you're pretty settled in India. You have a life there. And what's your life look like? I mean, what are you, what are you involved in? What's the organization? And talk to us about what you guys are up to.
Yeah. So I work with Central India Christian Mission. My mother-in-law and father-in-law started this ministry about almost 40 years ago now. It's been like 38 or 39 years ago that they started the ministry. I'm the only white guy working here with them, so it's completely national led. It's all Indians. And they started with just the two of them, basically, with a handful of people. And now, bro, the ministry's expanded to just be unbelievable. The footprint of CICM is touching not only India but several surrounding countries. In the last 38 years, the ministry has started, which I'll go into a little bit of what I'm doing with church planning and multiplication. So without talking about the multiplication side of things, in a traditional, normal church planting, style, basically, our organization has started about 3,300 churches in the last 38 years, which is unbelievable. And on any given Sunday, there's about 600,000 people that meet in a CICM church across the country. And so God has used CICM in massive ways. It started off as more of a church planting organization, but has now expanded. My wife leads a children's home, an orphanage. So she has over 150 kids at the children's home that she started when she was 20. Again, I married way up, bro. Way up.
Wow.
And so,
when I was 20, I didn't know what I was going to do for the weekend. So
exactly. Yeah, you don't want to know what I was doing when I was 20.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so she's just unbelievable. We have 5 other children's homes as well in different parts of the country, so 6 total. There's about 1,100 kids in those homes that God has used CICM to save and transform their lives. It's been just incredible. I lead a church planting school that we train up church planters to go plant more churches and multiply disciples. I also lead a training program called Ignite. So that's a part of our organization, which is where we got our investment name from, was the movement that we're leading in India. And so Ignite is, it's basically the idea of igniting movements of the gospel, igniting disciples who will make disciples, churches that will start churches. And out of all those trainings we've done, man, when we switch from addition to multiplication, so shifting our thinking towards multiplying disciples and churches, in the last 6 years, man, we've seen about 5,500 house churches started in the last 6 years. And so just mind-blowing what God has done with that. Just this year alone in 2020, in the midst of COVID, we've seen 1,300 churches started this year so far. It just in the midst of all that. So anyway, there's a lot of other things too, bro. I mean, we've got a hospital and a nursing college, and there's a ton of ministry pieces, but that's kind of our main heartbeat.
That's awesome, man. Well, that's amazing what God's doing through you and the organization that you're involved with. And I want to touch on this a little bit because I'm in America, obviously, and I go to a church, and they're one of their missions is church planting, right? And they actually just planted a church here, and what they mean by that is they typically have a church. Maybe it starts off typically at a school, or ours actually is at the YMCA or something like that, right? So they plant this church, and then their goal is eventually to move out of that school or YMCA to get their own building and to grow their church. And they have a pastor and they have worship music, and that's the typical American church. Now, when you talk about church planning in India, is that what you're talking about, or are you talking about something different?
Yeah, it looks quite a bit different in a few different ways. So, first of all, our leaders in India are literally risking their lives going to new areas. There is the threat of their life in several different parts of India, not everywhere. There are some really incredible open areas in India where they're not as against Christianity or Jesus. But then there's some really difficult areas that are our leaders are risking their lives and risking everything to go start churches. And so one difference is definitely the risk involved in doing something like that in some of the areas of India. The second one is, so these are usually starting in homes. So they're not starting in, buildings per se. They're starting in homes as they go into new areas or new villages. families that come to Christ then open their home to begin a meeting in that home. And so that's kind of where they begin. And many times they stay there. So they'll stay in that home and then multiply into other homes in the community and into other villages as well. And what we've seen is that when they stay kind of lean and mean, they actually multiply much quicker and easier than a larger building that may be more expensive, right? Because a home doesn't really cost anything. There's very, few expenses involved. You want to plant a church in the US, it usually takes hundreds of thousands of dollars, sometimes millions, depending on if you build a large building or not. And so it takes a lot of money. But in a place like India, where that's not really possible and the resources are not available for a lot of things like that, usually these churches are staying within homes or even outside under a mango tree or something like that, where they're meeting. And so that's definitely a second difference. I would say a third major difference is their focus on discipleship and obedience to Jesus. And so we really train our churches and disciples to be true followers of Christ, right? People who are actually doing what Jesus has called them to do and being who Jesus has called them to be. Not saying that churches in America don't do that, because we all long for that. But sometimes in the Western culture, we get disciples out of our churches in spite of what we're doing, not because of what we're doing sometimes. Mm-hmm. And what I see a lot of the Indian churches doing, they're getting disciples multiplying and true followers of Christ because of the way they're doing it, not in spite of what they're doing. And so they're not accidentally making disciples. They're very purposefully making disciples that are multiplying. They're simple, they're easy to manage, they're reproducible, so they can continue to multiply easily, and they're multiplying disciples in churches like crazy by having them, simple and reproducible like that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love that. So typically, like a house church, you're probably not talking about. So typically, here a church plant that you might have to have 50 people at least to start a church, something like that. I don't know, but you're probably talking about what, 10 people to 5? I don't know.
I mean, it'll be like 10 to 20 usually, something like that at the beginning. And the thing about, planting a church in America, man, a lot of times is you'll take 50 Christians from a bigger church and plant them in a smaller area to kind of launch the church. Mm-hmm. And here in areas where there are no Christians, that's impossible. So you've got to start with nothing. So you've got a couple people going into a brand new area where there's no Christians at all, no one who's ever heard of Jesus. I mean, imagine that, man. Like, our guys go into areas that they'll say, hey, have you ever heard of Jesus? And the common answer is like, hey, you might want to go up the road to another village. There might be a guy named Jesus there. We don't have anybody here by that name. Like, they have no idea who you're talking about. I mean, my father-in-law always says, we live in a world that more people have tasted Coca-Cola than have heard about Jesus, right? Yeah, more people know, Donald Trump or have tasted Pepsi than have heard the name of Jesus. And so it's an area that's in desperate need of the gospel. And so they're starting from ground zero, more like the book of Acts than, more of a traditional Western setting. Yeah, absolutely.
And I just want to dig in, this is obviously so it could be a controversial topic. I know that I go to a church here in America, and we have about 2,000 people that go to the church. There's a couple of different services. Anyways, COVID had hit, and they didn't have the kids service, right? So I had to take my son to the family center. So this is where like the families go, where kids don't have to be super quiet. They can run around, stuff like that. Anyways, so it was on a Sunday morning, and we're in the family center, and it's a pretty big area. And I look around, and we're the only ones in this family center. And I look around just how big it was and all the lights and everything going on. And I was like, this costs millions of dollars to run this thing, and I guess I never really realized that. And when you said that sometimes people in the Western culture become disciple makers in spite of what the church is doing, what does that mean?
Yeah, I just so in the way, because I grew up in in churches like that, bro. Exactly what you're talking about, and it's not that we have bad intentions or bad motives, right? I mean, we in the West, we're really trying to do what Jesus wants us to do. I mean, I know so many amazing leaders and pastors in America. I mean, we couldn't do the ministry we're doing in India without people like that in America that are being generous and giving money. But when it comes to being good stewards of what God has given us, I think exactly like what you're talking about. When it comes to being good stewards of that, when it comes to truly making disciples that will be who Jesus has called them to be and do what Jesus has called them to do, I think unintentionally, I think that we have created discussing that don't naturally lead to disciples. They lead to consumers, or they lead to people that are sitting in their pews every week, maybe listening to sermons, getting fed scripture, but never being expected to actually go do anything with it. And so the illustration that I use all the time comes out of Matthew 7 with the wise and the foolish builders, right? And so you've probably heard sermons on that, Brett, right? Where the wise man. We've heard sermons where guys talk about, if you want to be the wise man, build your life on Jesus, right? He's the rock. He is everything you need. And so if you build your life on Jesus, everything's going to be okay. If you build your life on anything else, sex, money, power, fame, any of that other stuff, wise man, not the foolish man, build your life on Jesus, not on all these other things. The problem, bro, with a sermon like that is that that's not what Jesus meant whatsoever. He didn't mean build your life on me and nothing else. The only difference in the wise and the foolish man, okay, the only difference, Jesus says the wise man was him who heard the words of God and put them into practice. He did it. He obeyed it. He went and accomplished what God called him to do. And the foolish man was the guy who heard the word of God and did nothing with it. He sat on it. So the foolish man's the guy sitting in church every week, listening to sermons and never doing anything with it, never being expected to do anything with what he's heard. That's the only difference between the two. And so I think unintentionally, we've created structures and forms and systems so that we are creating foolish builders rather than wise builders, because no one's expected to actually go do anything after Sunday morning. Mm-hmm. We've kept the bar so low. Come to church, invite your friends, give some money, and go home, right? And so we've created this beast of a structure that desperately needs people's offerings to keep it going. And so we need people to show up and give money so that our structures keep going, the machine keeps going, and we have a few professionals doing all the work when most of the people in the church are doing very little. And so I had a guy say to me once, he goes, Josh, I feel like we in America are stealing from our people. And I'm like, what do you mean? You mean money? Like we need to do better at money? He goes, no. I feel like we're stealing their ministry, because only the paid people are doing the ministry. And this is the ministry of every person in the church. Every man, woman, and child should be out there doing the ministry of Jesus, seeking and saving the lost, touching broken people, healing hearts and healing bodies. Like every person should be a part of this ministry that God's given us. And in the West, unintentionally, we've stolen that away from the majority of people in our pews. And we have, basically used the money that's being given to try to run this machine instead of equipping ordinary people to go do the work. And so we've tried to flip that on its head in India and try to get every single person involved in the ministry that God has called them to, and help them to multiply disciples out into the world, so that way they're doing and being what Jesus has called them to do and be.
Love it, man.
So, anyway,
I love it.
Yeah.
Do you think that the biggest, and we'll kind of, transition here, but do you think that the biggest thing, and the word obedience kind of, came to mind, and you said it, is the foolish builders? The main difference is that people hear the word of God and then they go home and then they really, they do it. And is that the big difference? That's a disciple maker.
Absolutely. I mean, if you want to boil it down, man, it's going to be living life, okay, living life in the way that Jesus has called us to. So, really, a follower of Christ or a disciple of Jesus, what that truly means in its essence is living the way Jesus lived or doing the things Jesus did. And so, if you think about it, man, if Jesus were in Indiana, where would he be going? What would he be doing? How would he be talking? Who would he be spending time with? Who would he be eating with? Who would he be loving and talking to and spending time with? If he's in India in one of these villages, how would he be living and acting? And that's a true disciple, is someone who's doing and acting the way Jesus would do and act, basically. And the way he would love, the way he would touch, the way he would talk. And so, yeah, I think that that's going to be the essence, man, is that the majority of us, bro, we come to church, we listen, we go home, and we really don't do anything with what we've learned, right?
Yeah.
Like I say all the time, Brett, like in the West, so here's my Bible, man. Dude, you could put this down and never pick it up again, okay? You and I, okay?
Mm-hmm.
We could put this down and never pick it up again. And if we just obeyed what we already know this says, it would shake our nation, man. It would shake the nation. It would shake the city we're in.
Amen.
And so often, dude, we're doing, and I'm not against reading the Bible. Don't get me wrong, guys. Like my point though is we're doing devotions every day. My quiet time, I got to get my quiet time in. We read page after page. We listen to sermon after sermon, and we don't do anything with what we're reading or listening to. It's like, hey, bro, how about you put this down for a minute? Think about what Jesus has already told you to do and start doing it. And then once you do it, pick it up again and find the next thing to do. We're so overeducated and under obedience in the Western world. And if we just started doing what we already know the Bible says, bro, I mean, it would radically transform the cities that we live in.
It's funny. Yeah, it's funny. So many times, even I do this too, but we hear the sermon or we hear the podcast or we hear the YouTube video or whatever, and we're like, wow, that was so good. And that's it.
Absolutely. You get the warm fuzzies, man. That's it.
Yeah. That made me feel so good. I feel so good after listening. I'm gonna listen to that again because it makes me feel so good. So anyways, thanks for sharing, man. That's awesome. I love just digging in. I know these are some of the thoughts. Obviously, you've instilled some of these thoughts into my heart as well. Just by listening to you, listening to other people that are really going this direction. And I'm a businessman, and church is a business, especially in the Western culture. And when you create this monster, just like business, right? I mean, I was flipping houses, a year ago, and my overhead was so high. I was like, every month was stressful because I was like, I have to make this much money just to feed everybody, feed this monster.
Yeah.
And it's so much, and it's so hard to get out of. And you're like, I can't get out of it because there's too much.
Yeah.
The monster's too big,
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the way the church is. And I'm sure that a lot of the pastors would say, man, I'm sure there's times where they're challenged or like, maybe I should do something different because this is just too much for me.
I heard a guy say, Brett, one time, which this is maybe a little NSFW, not safe for work, but I heard a guy say once, man, so the church is the body of Christ, right? When a body becomes a business, it's prostitution is what it is. When a body becomes a business, it's prostitution. And it's more Ezekiel style. So don't get mad at me. Look up Ezekiel. He talks the same way to Israel. But what you're saying, bro, is so true, man. Like sometimes I think we get in this race or whatever it is, even in the church world. I mean, you were just talking in the business world, we do it all the time. But where pastors just start feeling like they have no idea how to even do anything else or how to change it because the machine's already going. How do you stop it? Especially at churches that are 2,000, 3,000, 5,000, 10,000. When that puppy's going, man, I mean, how do you move that ship around? How do you change it? How do you change the expectations even of the people that are in it? Because they expect church to be a certain thing, right? It's not
Mhm.
just the leader's problem, but it's all of us. We expect a certain thing. We want a certain thing, and it's, dude, it's just hard to get out of it once you're in it.
Yeah, definitely. I want to talk about you co-authored a couple of books, and one of them I want to kind of dive into, and just to kind of give us, I know we probably have talked about it already, but it's Christian extremism, and you say the life of worth, a life worth dying for, right? So talk to us about that. What does that mean? Is that taking risks, going to Haiti or India and these dangerous areas? What do you mean by Christian extremism?
Yeah, I mean, it could definitely be that. It could also be, a thousand other things. But the big idea, honestly, the kind of the premise of the book, man, was that my father-in-law and I, really began to chew on this and think about it and pray through it. Because there are people in the world, when you hear the word extremism, okay, you automatically think of like a terrorist or something, like somebody that's doing some horrible thing in the name of their religion or the name of their faith or whatever. But as we started thinking about that, man, we thought, man, there are people in the world that believe in their religious system so deeply, okay, that they're willing to strap a bomb on their chest and blow something up. You know what I mean? Like they're willing to sacrifice everything for the sake of destruction, for the sake of hate, or for the sake of their false conception of what God is telling them to do. They're willing to do these crazy things in the name of these false ideologies, right? And they're willing to risk everything for that. And so our thought with Christian extremism, it basically was this: if we have a God that gave everything for us, right? That literally laid it all down to win you and I back to his hearts, then how much more should we be willing to give up for the sake of his name and the nations? How much more should we be willing to be a Christian extremist? And we define that in the book as basically true Christianity, okay? Not
Mhm.
like some crazy cult, but when you pick up the word and see what Jesus actually calls us to be, he calls us to be men and women, man, that use extreme love, right? It's like we need to be loving people in an extreme, massive, amazing way. Jesus said, "You'll know us by your love. They'll know us by your love, right? Like they'll know you by your love." Or extreme generosity. Like Christians should be the most generous people in the world. Like there should never be lack, bro. Like
Mhm.
um, in the church right now, globally, okay, there is enough money globally to end world poverty if we wanted to. Okay, there's enough money in the church right now globally to finish the Great Commission and hit every lost people group in the world. There's enough money to do it, man. We're just not willing to step out and do it. You know what I'm saying? Like
Mhm.
we have the resources, but do we have the resolve to make it happen? Do we have the commitment to make it happen? And so in the book, we talk about several different things: extreme love, extreme forgiveness, extreme generosity, extreme boldness, extreme prayer. Like we need to be men and women that aren't fighting our wars with bombs and guns and swords, but be men and women that are marching on our knees with extreme grace, extreme forgiveness, extreme love, extreme boldness, extreme courage, so that we are taking the love of Christ to every person, whether it's across the street or across the world. People need to know that we follow Jesus and he's the most amazing thing that's ever happened to this world. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I love it.
Like
I love it.
if Jesus showed up, bro, in your city, man, people would know it, bro. People would know it.
Yeah.
They would know he's there. And the sad thing is, bro, we've got churches, millions of them, in communities all over the world, and people have no idea that the body of Christ is in that city. They have no
Mhm.
idea. They don't
Yeah.
see it, they don't feel it, they don't touch it, they don't experience it. And so the whole idea of Christian extremism is we must be the hands and feet of Christ and have extreme love, forgiveness, grace, boldness, and pray extreme prayers that are going to actually empower us to live the life that God's called us to live. That's kind of the essence of it.
Yeah. I love what you said, because you talked about Christian extremism was really true Christianity. And a lot of times people don't know if someone's a Christian or not. They're a nice person, but they really don't know because they don't really talk about it that much. And you talked about Christian extremism is true Christianity, where a lot of times we try to just be in the middle, because if the word extremism or radical, we always put that next to someone who is a little crazy, a little wacko, politics, someone's a radical, whichever side. So we said, I don't want to be that far. I just want to be in the middle, and that's not really true Christianity, because that's not what Jesus called us to do.
Yeah.
I was listening to a book by Patrick Lencioni. Just came out with a book called Motive, and it's for business leaders. And if you guys are listening, check out this book, Motive. And he was on a podcast and he was talking about leadership, which he talks a lot about leadership. You teach a lot about leadership, and he talked about servant leader, and he wants to end that servant leader word, right? And he said, well, a lot of people talk about, well, if you're going to be a leader, you should be a servant leader. And Patrick Lencioni says, well, like, what other type of leader is there? Like, is there a non-servant leader? Like, that shouldn't even be anything. There's the egotistical leader that always thinks about themselves. So, like, you shouldn't say servant leader, because if you are a leader, you are a servant leader, right? And I think that's what, you had to use the word
Absolutely.
Christian extremism, which really is tough to use, but it's good, because really it's just Christianity, right? We've just kind of watered it down. So
Yeah, and
anyway.
that's the problem, dude. We've watered it so far down that normal Christianity now isn't even close to biblical Christianity. Like, it's not even close to where the bar is that Jesus set. You know what I mean? And so we've got it so far down that living out what Scripture tells us is, in our minds, extreme.
Yeah.
So we need to get the level back up to where it needs to be, and then it won't be extreme anymore. It'll just be normal.
Yeah, definitely. Well, check out that book, guys, Christian Extremism. And then you wrote another book too, right? What was that book?
Igniting Movements.
Igniting
Igniting
Movements.
Movements.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, check out those guys. And we'll definitely, put those in our notes on our YouTube channel, the Brett Snodgrass channel. So check that out. Josh, so we've talked about kind of what you're doing, the books that you've wrote. I want to talk about now. I get this a lot too, because I have a missionary heart too. I want to go to different countries. We've talked about me going to Guatemala and helping out some orphanages there, and also, guys, I mean, we haven't really touched on your wife, starting this orphanage. Let's talk about that real quick. So, in America, we don't really have a lot of that. We have group homes or foster homes and things like that. But you go to these other countries, they have orphanages. What have you seen and felt with all of that, with these kids who I'm sure they all have these stories, right? And what have you seen just God doing inside of your orphanages that you guys are a part of?
Yeah, bro. I mean, it's like the difference between dark and light, man. You're going to get me emotional talking about this, bro, because when we start talking about kids, man, it's their stories are heartbreaking. I mean, just to give you a sampling of it, we don't need to dive deep into these, but like, we've got a children's home up in the northeast part of India that every kid was saved out of a brothel, right? They were children of prostitutes in a brothel. They were being groomed to be put back into that industry and sold as sex slaves, basically. And our pastors came in and saved them out. So they're all kids like 10 and under, man, that grew up in a brothel. And they were kept while their mothers were selling their bodies. They were kept in closed off dark rooms, locked away. They couldn't even get out if they wanted to. Okay. They were thrown a few cookies every day for food. They were forced to huff gasoline to take hunger pains away so they would quit crying. Horrible, horrible situations. And our pastors went in the middle of the night to save these kids, right? And now to go up there and to see man, these are some of the most beautiful, amazing, loving kids you could ever imagine. And to know the darkness and basically the hell they came out of, right? It's, Jesus says that when he builds his kingdom, the gates of hell will not prevail. Okay. The gates of hell will not prevail. I've heard so many preachers, dude, say something like, that means Satan's not going to win. When he attacks us, he's not going to beat us. He's not we'll be victorious. The gate of hell is not an offensive weapon. Gates are defensive weapons to keep things out, not to attack with. And so what Jesus was saying is that Christians would bust down the gates of hell and bring heaven into places that look like hell. And that's exactly what our leaders did up there. They busted down the gates of hell of a brothel and saved these kids out and brought them out of darkness into light is what happened. Wow. And so the gates of hell will not prevail, man. We had a boy, bro, here in our children's home, man, that's a woman was walking on a dirt road in a village and saw a plastic bag on the side of the road moving, and she opened it up and a baby was inside. Somebody had literally put their child after being born in a plastic bag and dumped it on the side of the road to be left to die. And by God's grace, this woman must have walked by just a few minutes after it had been dumped because the baby was still alive. She called our hospital. Our people rushed there, saved the baby's life. He grew up in our children's home and is one of the most incredible little guys you could ever meet, man. He's so loving and gracious, has recently been adopted into a family and has his own family now, and just a beautiful situation. But dude, when you have story after story after story like that of kids just being in some of the most horrendous, horrible situations you could ever imagine and seeing their life radically transformed before your eyes, man, just to see their confidence, their loving nature, their playful, joyful, you know what I mean? Like these things that they may not have experienced some of those emotions in like the brothel situation or in some of these abusive homes that they were in or whatever. They didn't know what peace and safety felt like. They didn't know what joy and excitement felt like, every day of their lives. And then to bring them out of that and see them in that environment has been just amazing. And so my wife has created a really special culture in the children's home that is just so amazing. And the kids they just thrive, man. They really do incredible.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing some of those stories, man. Some of those stories are heartbreaking to hear. Do you think that if people knew or saw that we would try to do more, I guess, especially in the Western culture, like, is it just because we don't know and we don't want to know?
So I'll let Prophet Josh come out for a second here, okay? I think the problem, bro, is that we do know.
Yeah.
I think the problem is that we ignore it. It's not that we don't know. I think there's plenty of information in the world and plenty of talk and discussion, especially amongst Christian groups, that Christians and churches across the world know what's happening globally. They know about sex trafficking. They know about kids being abused. They know about people being lost and dying without Christ. They know the numbers. They know what's happening. But we just have such short attention spans that we move on to the next thing and our phone beeps and we've got the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And pretty soon it's out of sight, out of mind, man. Mm-hmm. We have hundreds of people visiting our organization every year. And it's not that every single person who comes to visit and sees these stories go back and radically change the way they live. Some do. And I'm so grateful for those that do. But it's a small percentage of those who do. You know what I mean? Because everyone leaves, all of them leave with a deep desire to do something different, to change something, to try to help in the situations that they see or feel. But life gets so crazy, dude. And we have so many bells and whistles around us and flashing lights that we get so caught up in our own lives and our own in what's going on around us that we forget about the true needs across the world.
Hmm.
And so I don't think it's that we don't know. I think it's that we choose to turn a blind eye to it. I think it's that we choose to. It's easier, man, to focus on the things in front of us than the things 10,000 miles away.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally
Yeah.
agree. Well, again, thanks for sharing. If you guys are tuning in, make sure, reach out to Josh. We'll put his information too. And if you guys do want to get involved, really appreciate that or hear more. And I'm sure there's obviously countless stories with that. Josh, before we kind of wrap up the show, there's one last thing I really want to talk about. And I've been able to meet some missionaries more recently, and I don't know if God's been just bringing them into my life for a reason. They like listen to my real estate podcast and they call me up, and I guess it's like the only real estate podcast that actually talks about God, possibly. I don't know.
Yeah,
um
that might be it.
yeah, yeah, but it's been I've also seen a movement with missionaries, and I don't know if you went to a missionary class or a school that that talked about, and you talked about this earlier, that talked about like, hey, here's how you be a missionary, you do this and here's the steps or whatever. But you're kind of taking a different route because you, number one, you're a creator, you're already an entrepreneur, whether you think that you built a big business or not. You're already a creator and an entrepreneur. You're creating churches and planting churches and you're growing something, right? I think about entrepreneurs doing that. But now the money has kind of came into play, and you've started a real estate business in Indianapolis, Indiana, and it's called Ignite Investment Group. And you're kind of, this is something different that you've been doing, different than the last decade, right? So I'm assuming that you
Yeah.
raised support and got money and things like that. So talk to us about that, and what's been your experience with your desire to start a business and to make money
Yeah.
other than the support.
Yeah. So we've been on and still are, we've been on support for our family since I moved here. My wife and I have a couple amazing churches that pay our entire salary. So I have one church in America that pays my whole salary every year. And my wife has one church in America that pays her whole salary. And so we've not had to do the traditional go and raise money from 50 different churches to try to make sure we even have a salary. God's really blessed us with that. And so all the support raising we have to do is for the actual work, which has been unbelievable and incredible. Over the last couple of years, though, I've really started to feel this desire in my heart to become financially independent. So that way, even the money that these churches are sending for our salary can also go into the work. So that we can continue to push it to make a bigger impact in this part of the world, basically. And so I've looked at a lot of different things, man, over the last couple of years, what could be, what could possibly work, and how might we be able to replace our income with our organization. And so then that way, we could continue to put the money back into the work, and we don't have to be dependent upon, the nonprofit side of things for that. And all of our work here could be 100% voluntary. Similar to the Apostle Paul, tent making idea, he kind of made his living with his own two hands. And so I've been really kind of challenged by that the last couple of years. And so I've tried a few different things that have fell flat on their face, dude, and none of them worked. And so we pick ourselves up and dust ourselves back off again and think through other opportunities. And so a few months ago is when we kind of launched out into the real estate side of things. One of our mutual friends, Chris Galanos, told me about real estate investment and what they're doing in Texas. And so I talked to my brother-in-law about it, and we decided to kind of launch out into real estate investment in order to try to do exactly what I was just talking about. How could we get to a point where, we may be able to be fully financially independent, so that way we could just focus 100% on the ministry without needing to take a salary from it, and we can put all the money back into the work. And plus, if we make above and beyond our salary needs, we can use that money too for the kingdom, which would be awesome. That if we keep, raising more money that way, right? And so It's been awesome, bro. I mean, this has been out of the several things we've tried, this has been the one thing that's actually, sticking and working and really, really we've got off to a really hot start, man. It's been really good.
Good. Awesome, man. Well, that's good. Have you gotten any pushback from other missionaries because I think that again, this is just different, right? It's really not if you go to business school, for example, they teach you a certain way, but if you try to do something different, you get some pushback in missionary class or missionary school. You're around other missionaries. If you try to do something different, do you get pushback from that? I mean, what's been your experience?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've had both sides of the spectrum, bro. So I've had people that are like, bro, tell me what you're doing. I've been feeling the same way. I want to do something like that too, right? So I've talked to missionaries in different parts of the world that have asked me to kind of, tell my story to them about how they could possibly get started in similar things, or even pastors in America. And then I've had the other the other side of the spectrum that's like, what are you doing, man? You're going to take time away from your ministry, and like,
Exactly.
you need supporters because that helps build prayer support and all that type of stuff. And you shouldn't steal them of their blessing and all these different, all those other things. And my answer to that has always been, I'm not asking anybody to quit giving, man. We've got plenty of work to do over here. I just would love to get to a point where I don't have to take salary from it. Like, I'll still raise support, and I'm still going to have people involved in our ministry, and people are still going to give towards the work in India and all that. I just want to try to get to a point where I don't have to draw salary from that, if that makes
Mhm.
sense. And so once I kind of explained that to people, that I wasn't fully transitioning to a completely no support model at all, no one's going to be involved, we're shutting everything down, it's nothing like that. Then people were a little bit more open and accepting of that idea. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's great. I think it's awesome. Obviously, I come from the business world, and I've talked to other. I was talking to another missionary a few months ago, and talking about this, and he said sometimes he feels a little awkward because he works at a church and or kind of goes around and helps evangelize, and he always wonders if people look at him asking him, I wonder what he does like for work, right? Because he doesn't work.
Yeah.
And then I said, well, have you ever thought about just starting a business over there? I mean, could you start a little business and that could bring people in? And I don't know. And he's like, I've
Yeah.
never thought about that. I was like, anyways,
Yeah.
that's just my mind
Yeah,
thinking.
absolutely.
Well,
Yep.
that's awesome, man. Well, I know that we're going to be sending this out to number one, believers, non-believers. If you're a missionary too and you want to talk to Josh about what it looks like to try to support yourself and doing that, I think that's a great thing. And it's for me too, I have an amazing real estate business that I've stepped out of now, and I'm able to talk to amazing people like Josh and do the things that I love doing and my purpose. And I don't raise support, I guess, with all that. So businessmen, you can be uh just a light, right, in the marketplace too. And so I know that we got so much out of this interview, Josh. I really appreciate you being with us today, man. And so much just wisdom out of this, and I really appreciate it. One last, any last advice, anything that you want to share to our listening audience out there that is just thinking about what you're doing, Christian extremism, obedient to the word, anything at all?
Yeah, man. That's a that's a good question, bro. How much time we got? No, I'm just kidding. So honestly, I'd say the thing that kind of bubbled up to my heart right now is you were talking about the business side, is probably where I guess the last thing I would say is just that I feel like sometimes business guys, man, I've talked to so many business guys across the world that kind of feel like, you know, they don't have a ministry, or that they don't have anything they could be doing for the kingdom. And it's like, man, we need incredibly kingdom minded business guys all over the world in order to build successful businesses, draw people in, Be generous towards the kingdom, right? Support people that are out there doing the work, and support people that are national leaders that are planting churches and doing all that stuff. We need people like that, and we need people in the business world that's going to live like Jesus, love like Jesus, be a Christian extremist in the business worlds. We have to have, man, lights of Jesus in every facet of society. It can't just be in the church, right? I mean, we need great, amazing Christian people in Hollywood. We need great Christian business people in every business sphere of society, right? And we need them all over the place in order to live and love like Jesus. And so I just say, for the business people out there watching, don't spit on your calling. Like, don't spit on where God's put you and where he's got you, because we need people that are being true disciples of Jesus in every facet and sphere of society, so that lives can be touched and transformed. And what I'll tell you as a missionary, I guarantee the hundreds of business people listening to this, or the thousands listen to this, or whatever, I guarantee you're going to be able to touch people's lives that would never even talk to me, or would ever even, like, or my pastor, for example, or somebody who's a professional, minister or something like that. You're rubbing shoulders with people that we never even have access to, or never even be able to talk to. And so I just want to encourage you, like, be a light, be an extremist wherever you're at. Use extreme love, extreme generosity, extreme boldness, and live out the life of Jesus, no matter where God has you, and just, shine that light into the darkest places of your community, and you're going to see some really incredible things happen.
Love it, man. Love it. That's a good word. That's a good word we're going to end on, guys. Appreciate you, Josh, everything that you had to share. And where do you hang out, man? Do you hang out online? Where can people find you?
I'm really not online much, just for, some security issues and stuff. No. And so, but I can, like, email, or, I'm on WhatsApp. I know that's not usually an American thing, but I've got a WhatsApp account. If somebody wants to find me there, then that could be cool.
Awesome. We'll put your email. We have your email here, and we'll put that in our notes on our YouTube channel. Really appreciate you, man. This has been awesome, and I know that I got a lot out of it, and I'm ready to move overseas. Like right now.
Oh man, come over here with us, bro. Come on over.
Sounds good. Well, that's a wrap. Thank you so much for being on the show today, and God bless you, man.
Yeah, thanks, buddy. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for checking out the Brett Snodgrass channel. If you like this video, please slam on that like button. And if you really like it, then subscribe to our channel here. And remember to leave us a comment below, and I'm going to try my hardest to reply to all the comments. Thank you guys so much. This is why I do what I do. Every single week, I come out with content that focuses on success, freedom, and living out your purpose. Thank you guys so much. See you next time.